Hello, my little apple fritters, and this is a special preview for my patrons on Patreon. It will go public a little bit later on, but I want to give you a sneak peek at what I am working on, and you'll probably know by now this is Gaslight London for Chaosium. I'm deeply honored and humbled to be able to work on this for them, and of course, I'm kind of doing it as only I can. I'm going kind of nuts. You know, I say as only I can. That's not the phrase I was really sort of shooting for. As only I can possibly approach a map in a slightly demented manner. That's my style. That's my approach. That's what I decided to do here. I am pretty darn sure Chaosium are not expecting me to hand this to them, but it's what we do, right? It's kind of how I approach my cities. So if you ask me to draw London, I'm going to draw London as Faden draws. You know what I'm saying? So what I want to do is I just wanted this to be 10-15 minutes of giving you a high-res look at what I've done thus far. I'm going to talk about a little of the logic and how I'm approaching this, but then I'm going to talk to you about next steps and my sources for inspiration and where I've actually been finding these old maps of the period. So just in case you want to know, I'm shooting for 1890 as being the year. There is actually a lot of change that happens in London, and I'll show you some examples of that. Let's say between 1850, 1860 and 1890. 1890, it's actually a lot more built up in the corner here and up here. Otherwise, like these areas, about 30 years before actually start going off into more of a rural, almost country-like area. But also less rail, 30 years before and so on and so forth. So that's the year I'm shooting for. I am drawing this on a Wacom HD 24-inch, I said HD, a Wacom 24-inch HD Touch. That's the one. It's basically a big, huge monitor. It lies flat and you can draw directly on it. I love it because I am a very ink on paper girl. That's my origin. I like that direct from finger to pen tip to ink on the paper happening, and if I'm using one of those other tablets where it's kind of disconnected, I'm not as comfortable with those. So that's the device that I'm using. I'm doing this in Photoshop. Honestly, you could do it in anything where it supports you just drawing lots and lots of irregular shapes. Now, how am I going about this? Well, I'm going to show you my resources. I'm going to talk about my process. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I've got, and you might see the tabs at the top here, I've got multiple maps from Library of Congress, Library of Scotland, Library of London. You get the idea. And they have some pretty good resources. And so I've grabbed the relevant ones, including some that aren't quite period, but they have a good look and feel. And I've been just slowly and surely looking at the map and drawing it. Get the road in place, start to fill in the buildings in between. So that's kind of been my approach, and I'm a very methodical person. Just keep drawing buildings until city blocks and entire areas just start to get flooded with ink. You've seen me draw my other cities, my fantasy cities. I'm doing the same approach here. I'm just looking at reference materials to make sure that I'm actually correct in what I'm drawing, because things like parks, even little tiny parks like this, I want to get them on the map if they existed, right? And the position of rail and that type of thing. Now, by the way, this rail, you'll see that it's cutting through buildings. I think this is the underground here. That's why you're seeing a lot of this. And I'm probably, because I've got this on a separate layer, I'm going to come up with a slightly different treatment, maybe even a different color, maybe dotted, I'm not sure, so we know that it is the underground. But I'm going to come back to that, okay? I want to research which lines existed in this period. These definitely did, but which ones were underground, which ones weren't, and give it an appropriate treatment from there. So this is basically just me drawing ink on paper, following reference materials, and redrawing if need be, like this Tower of London. And I'll show you an example of this. This is my third iteration of it. You'd think that the Tower of London, why would I have to redraw that? I mean, you know, surely it's going to be right the first time out of the gate. Well, some maps have a slightly different idea for what it looked like. And honestly, at the end of the day, you know, I would draw it, it would not look right, but I'd think, well, did it have a different shape like over 100 years ago? Was it partly ruined? Has it, like, gone through a restoration? And it hasn't, it's just the reference map was not brilliant. So there's definitely been a wonderful, and I say that with some sarcasm, a wonderful level of research that I've had to do as well. Another area was actually over here with, there we go, Westminster. I have not Westminster, no, the Houses of Parliament, Jesus Christ. I guess it's been a long day. But this has 3 different shapes on my reference materials and 3 different positions. Now, the Houses of Parliament did burn down. Earlier on, around 1830, it was actually separate buildings in a slightly different position, and there's a big, huge fire, and they rebuilt it. But one of the reference maps I had rebuilt it, and it looked like I don't know, some kind of weird circus tent. It was kind of odd. So this has also been redrawn a couple of times as I've sort of referenced different maps and from different periods and so on and so forth. So I do have right now this area here to still draw in. That's probably a session right there, about 4 hours, I think, 3-4 hours. And I've got to sweep up the side of the map to about here. So that's probably another session. Now, here, my maps, you know, if you think about it, these reference maps that I'm going to show you, they're all hand-drawn. And even though they, you know, would cite that they were from surveyor sort of maps, you know, that type of thing, and highly accurate sort of, you know, sources, at the end of the day, they were hand-drawn, and they tended to vary. They would vary in things like, you know, let's just zoom in here. Like, they might all have this road intersection here, but they would have them on slightly different angles. And not because this road was rebuilt over 20 years or 30 years, they just had them on slightly different angles, slightly different sizes, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to probably have to kind of merge a couple of different resources as we get close to the park here. But that should be okay. I've got about, I want to say, 2 sessions, about 8 hours of drawing to have all of the black and white work done. I have not yet added the bridges. There. You can kind of see where I've got placeholders for them. I know that bridges have got to be here. I am only doing the bridges that were actually there in the period. It's funny, I've actually got some reference materials where certain bridges don't exist, or they're dotted with proposed bridge, so they're right on the brink of new bridges being introduced. So you can see kind of where I've got these bridges ready to go. I just don't know what layer I want to put them on yet. I don't know if I want to make them part of the river layer. It's kind of a river coast. This right here, if I zoom in, we've got these buildings are in black. That's kind of a one layer. And I've got this more brownish riverbank. That's a separate layer. I'm trying to make a decision if I want to keep the bridges on a yet another layer, because I've got some styles for colouring and things here that would benefit from the bridges being part of the river layer. Let's just say that. So I'm kind of just waiting on that. Also, there are some terminals. You'll see that I've got all of these rails and no terminals. Like Waterloo is not on here yet. There's a massive terminal here, which is more of a sort of a shipyard, dockyard type of terminal, you know, industrial sort of terminal. I haven't done any of those. The only terminal I've actually done is, I think this is King's Cross, right? It's King's Cross and Euston over here. King's Cross, and I haven't done the rail yet either because I want to closely look at these buildings. This is the only terminal I've done because I didn't want to do them in solid black. Historical maps just do like just a black blob for every single terminal, and I kind of want to do something different, maybe something a little bit more intricate like this. And I'm not even sure if I want to do it black, so I'm thinking I'm going to do the terminals on another layer, and maybe a very deep blue or something like that. I don't want to say green. I don't want to even commit to a color. Maybe very deep brown, maybe a reddish brown or something like that. So they kind of stand out. Oops, I just duplicated a layer. And if I do actually do them on their own layer, then I have choices of just swapping out their colors and things later on. So this is kind of where I'm at. And there's some lovely detail in here. If you're wondering, by the way, the black buildings, and I'll show you this on the reference maps in a moment, the black buildings are churches, they are cathedrals, St. Paul's is this way, public buildings such as gasworks, Tower of London, well, I've just moved something again, the Tower of London, Buckingham Palace. So they're almost major points of interest. But they also did things like blacksmiths. There were a lot of blacksmiths in London 1890. Like a lot. Like this is a church. This is like a blacksmith here. And they marked them on the map, which I think is fascinating, absolutely adorable. And I kind of like the difference in the texture that it gives you, even uncolored. And I do think that this map in black and white looks pretty good. You know, I like this. This is a true homage to black and white drawing. I'm very proud of how this has come out. When this, by the way, I'm going to then ensure that we keep the black and white version without a doubt. But let me show you what I'm thinking about doing and my reference materials for coloring. Because this is going to be coloured at the end of the day. Now, just word of warning, real quick. Some of the resources, no, in fact, it's not some, it was one. The Library of London had a huge amount of London maps available digitally. Of course they did. And they are the worst in the world that I have found so far for resolution. And I was bitterly disappointed. I downloaded the highest resolution that they made available on their site. And they are pretty pathetic. That was it. That's the size. And you can see that there's no resolution to this. Like, at all. And just to, by the way, give you a sense of things, let's just, like, go over to maybe this one right here. This is Library of Congress. The American Library of Congress has way better maps. Look at the resolution of this thing. So, but I want to show you the Library of London first, or the University of London, just very quick, just to sort of tell you why I'm keeping certain things around and where my head is at. Couple of things. First and foremost, what did the borders look like back in the day? So that's one thing I'm looking at. I'm drawing inspiration. How did they actually get a key or a scale bar on the map? And you can see there's quite a few with this, but this is a pattern, by the way. I know this is low resolution, but I'll show you some high ones in a moment. But kind of throwing stuff into like the corners or flowing it into the map, or doing labels like this, pretty common. And this type of treatment where they got wonderful swirls and things like that for the actual name of the map and who did it. I'll show you a better version of this in a moment. And we've got other inserts over here. So if I want this map that we're working on to sort of look period, these are the things that I need to be thinking about. And I am thinking about. But also notice how the Thames is done on this. It's almost got like a little shadow on the shorelines. Kind of filters out the deeper the waters go. And major roads coloured in. This is a theme, by the way. Major roads being coloured in like an orange or a yellow. Very much a theme across all of these maps. Let me show you. And I'm just going to close these because they're really not good for another resource. Okay. This is similar. What I'm taking out of this is this type of treatment down here. Although in all truth, we're not going to do it this way. You know how this actually works? Is they have like a very simple border here, but you can see they have these squares on here. All of these maps have squares on them, and it's like a grid, but sometimes they just like number the actual square, and then if a building is in that square, they plop that number next to it. So lots of buildings could have the same number, and you just got to go to that square and look it up. I could show you a better version of that in a moment. We're not doing that. That's crazy. That is old school right there. I mean, we're probably going to have to take some modern liberties to make this useful as a game aid, right? Otherwise, there's not that much I'm going to take out from that one. Now, like over here, there's a couple that do this type of thing, by the way. You know, big, huge, bold head. Look, they've drawn all of these points of interest along the sides. Wonderful, sort of almost Greek-inspired border. But look how much paper is actually used up with this decoration. It's great for inspiration. Maybe this type of thing, but otherwise, I'm not going to do it. You'll also see that the Thames has got the same sort of shading going along the border or the coastline. Okay, it keeps going back to that one. My apologies. This one, similar sort of principle. It's got these wonderful illustrations, but we're not. Look how little is actually reserved from the map. I don't think we can do something like that in good conscience. Here, by the way, you see this a few times. They shoved this big, huge illustration on the piece. I mean, it's nice. It's a nice illustration. You can barely read London, but okay. You can see the major roads again. They got that yellow-orange going on. There is that little bit of shading on the coastline of the Thames itself. This is one of the few, by the way, that actually has a compass rose on it, which I think is quite curious. Most don't. Very, very simple border otherwise. So let's close that. Now here, again, they've got the inserts going on. They've got all of the labels corresponding to grid positions on here. And this is pure black and white. I mean, oops. I was going to sort of go back to my map, but you know, this is, you know, it's almost like if I finish my black and white on my map, it's like we could probably call it done, you know, in so many ways. But yeah, again, I'm not so much, I think I'm going to draw out of that. I just like looking at them to see what other people did. I'm going to go through the bad ones before we start getting into the good ones. This is another great example of, you know, you finish the map and it's almost like they've cut out and stuck on an illustration here and an illustration there. Don't they look kind of weird? Like in position there. But I do like the way that they name the map. I'm going to talk to Chaosium about maybe us doing something like that. Maybe even something like in their book, you know. And then a little illustrated plan to London. I love just how flowery the text is. So we're probably going to use something like that. This one I'm going to come back to is a much higher resolution. Let's just get through these painful ones. Again, too much border. Space being taken up. Crosses London Guide. I do like that. We're beginning to see shading on the Thames. I'll show you a better version of this in a moment. And again, grid and numbers down at the bottom here. It's not your traditional like label number. They didn't do that back then, but we're gonna have to, right? I don't think that there's too much more of these. You can see like the sheer volume of London maps that the University of London had, and just how disappointingly small they all are. There's another one, big, huge illustration, another black and white one. The buildings have actually been filled in with a little bit of grey. This one, not a lot I can sort of get from that one. Let's just close this down. And then, I think now we get into the good stuff. In fact, I'm going to just close these down here. We don't need these. And then I'm going to show you the main maps that are my true inspiration right now. And where we're going to be looking very, very, very closely for our colouring and border styles. So many maps from London. Look, come on, let's... Yeah, and all of them disappointingly small. Here we go. All right. So the Crutchley's New Plan of London. This is a real nice resource. they do something interesting. Well, I've noticed, by the way, here's a beautiful example of a square. It's not quite a square, but you get the idea. But it's C. So any building that has a C next to it is in that square. You see that? So Chiswell Street is in square R. So you got to go over to R, which I can't find. You know, I'm not even sure. Oh, is that no, that's not R. That's N. M-N-O-P. Oh, they've got the O-P-Q-R-R. Isn't that weird? The fact that even the squares are different sizes, I think, maybe. But the fact that they've even gone from top down. So delightful. This one, by the way, you can see that it's... You see that, like, almost the canvas behind that's coming through here? It's quite interesting. So, yeah, somewhere in here is the label, that Chitchwell Street or whatever it was. But the hash on the buildings is something I'm looking at. I don't think I'm going to do it this way. It makes the map too dark. I do like the yellow-orange on the main roads. I do like how they've got the shading on the Thames. So the deeper you go, actually, the lighter it gets. It just the regular paper starts to bleed through. I'm going to combine that with something, I believe, and I'll show you that in a moment. Interesting treatment of lines. I think this is an underground here. And nice fonts and things like that. So there's definitely some inspiration to take from this one. And you can see that the resolution is sufficient for me to be able to go, okay, I understand the shape of a building, the relative size of a building, and where it is on the map. And then, you know, effectively copy that. This type of red could be good for my terminals, but actually I'm thinking about using this on something else. I'll show you that in a moment. Over here, the Bacon's Traveller's Pocket Map of London. I kind of like, by the way, this treatment here quite a bit. I'm thinking about doing something similar. This one has got more of our conventional coordinates, numbered and letters. I like that. I could see using something like that. It's got a pretty extensive rail system marked on the map, which I kind of like as well. And the detail is good. We can zoom all the way in and really get down into the nitty-gritty. Now, I think the parks and everything start to look a little bit messy to me, but I do like the fact that there's a little bit of texturing and even to put some trees, and I'm thinking about picking up on that. I don't like the fact that they've coloured over all of the ponds and everything in the same green. I think we're going to do blue. I am intrigued by using some of these little contour lines. I know they weren't intended as contour lines, but something similar to this, but in blue after we colour it blue, right? So combining like this, but putting some like dark blue lines behind it. So I'm going to play around with that in a way, and they will be easier to do. I think they will be easier to do if I do the bridges as part of the water, the shore edge. I got to experiment with that a little bit. But yeah, you should see good details. I love the penitentiary detail on this one. I picked that up on mine. Oh, there he is. You can see where I kind of got the inspiration for this. And the fact that we got a little sort of, chapel or something here too. I believe I managed to capture that. Yeah, right there as well on mine. So you can kind of see the process. I don't like the dotted look for the parks. I'm going to probably do something a little bit different. They have got something different going on for the major terminals, which I appreciate. But then the train stations are just, and I think these are underground ones. They just do these black blobs. I want to do something different. That's exactly what I want to do differently. You know, it's just too much black. I want them to stand out a little bit, particularly being part of the underground. But some interesting concepts, and especially I kind of like the grid approach. And this whole G.W. Bacon and Company, 127 Strand. I love that. I think we're going to do something very similar to that. There's a few details on this map I definitely want to pick up. This one is generally too dark for me. It's a great resource. Again, you can see wonderful detail on the Millbank Penitentiary. Also, this is a little bit too early in year. But again, you can see they've got the gold color on the major roads. Interesting grid on this one. You see how they've got each square divided into 2 numbers? And these almost horizontal lines. That's kind of interesting look, don't you think? Might be a little bit too busy on the edges, but interesting. Nice blue for the Thames, but I kind of like how it fades on some of the other maps. Also, little grass sprigs and trees and things. The fact that this is using trees as well, it basically tells me that I can do some trees on mine. So I've been using this for some reference, but generally I think I'm going to lean on the others a little bit harder. This one here, the Whitbread's New Plan of London. This is a great one, but you'll notice this is a prime example of down here. It's empty of buildings. It hasn't been built up yet, and up here is exactly the same boat. It's just a little bit too early in its period, but look at how high of a resolution this is. Look how clear and wonderful that is. I love the green on the parks. I don't like how sloppy it's been coloured in, but I do like the colours on this one. I think I'm going to pick them up. The hash on the buildings I like, but this is too dark for me. I'm going to play around with a different colour, which I'll show you in a moment. But this hash look is one I'm going to play around with. I'm going to play around with grey, and I'm going to play around with a different colour. This almost watercoloured green, I like that because it gives some variation in it. Yeah, the Thames has got that nice little sort of fading of the blue, which I dig. Also, this is one of the first few maps that actually brings the same blue into the dock areas as well. Most actually haven't been doing that. They go off and just colour them in a completely different colour, which I think is kind of weird. So I'm definitely gonna pick up on this. Also, have you noticed every single street is named? Every one. Now, I don't know if I can do that, and I don't know if that's worth doing, because the print size of this, you know, the sans like a poster would be like this, and you can't read them. You just can't read them. But what they do give is this old world texture, I think. So I'm tempted. I am really, really, really tempted to try and throw a whole bunch of labels on this map. I just don't know if that's worth doing or not. The major roads definitely have to be done, but like to do all of these side ones, that might be just not only insanity. Insanity is good because we're dealing with chaos in, but it could be just a pure waste of time. You know, I mean, they might just take a look at it and go, no, get rid of them. So I like how the map looks because of that. These just saturated in labels. But at the end of the day, I think the jury's still open. If you got a thought, and if you've been listening this long, let me know down in the comments. This one here, this is a lot clearer. This is actually about tramways or something like that. I think street plan, pocket, atlas, London. I love that. I think it was actually showing tramways or something like that, if I remember. There we go. Omnibus and tramway routes shown thus. So this is mainly for that type of thing. It's a little simplified in some areas. You see that, the penitentiary. Building shapes are simplified because it's really not about the buildings or even those micro streets. What I like about this is the texture in the Thames and the colour of the city blocks. Do you see how they're still kind of... I'm going to call it a hash, but I think in this it might be the paper texture bleeding through, but I kind of like that, and it's almost got this pink to it. I am tempted to experiment and try this as an option. I think that's what we're going to end up doing. We're going to try it. We're going to try it and see how that comes out. This kind of color, like on these. And it'll be the type of thing I can do quickly, because I can actually, all of the buildings are drawn on their own layer. So I can actually just mask and say, they'll fill the buildings with this pattern. And we'll create a pattern for that. I think it could be interesting. And then I think this is the last one. Yes, this is the last one. This is a brilliant map, by the way. I'm going to zoom in. Look how wonderful the detail is on this thing. And the colours aren't too bad either. I'm not a huge fan of the stippling for the buildings. Whoever did this, by the way, is nuts. Can you imagine? They would have done that stippling by hand. Look at that. That's just crazy sauce. I love it. But 1835. It's too early. I like the board is interesting. Of course, we've got the big, huge title and everything, and this down here. I think we could definitely borrow things like this. I love the blue of the Thames. I kind of like how that's been approached. I think this one too has kind of put a little bit of different coloration based upon the like maybe the district of London that you're in. Also, though, by the way, that I think this is like maybe been broken at one point and they've like stuck it on something, and so things don't actually line up. So this is a map that's actually in. It's almost like it's been folded. And then it's broken along those folds, and so they've actually stuck it down on some paper or something, or some like canvas. But this, I was actually, funny stories, I was actually looking so closely at this map without realizing how outdated it was, but also the fact that this type of thing was going on, and I could not understand why my map was not aligning up with this. Well, yeah, because it's literally got these like 1/4-inch gaps everywhere. I do love this blue that they're using on this map, though. It's such a lovely soft blue, yet so clear, and also the parks. I love the parks. A little bit of detail, a few bushes, a couple of trees, nothing too over the top, you know. A little bit of grass texture going on. I kind of like it. Kind of like how they picked out the blue from the surrounding green. We've seen that not all maps do that. And again, all the main roads got their own colour. So we're definitely going to be doing that. Maybe something like this. But on our map, I'm actually reserving, I think, down here. In fact, let me just quickly turn on the POIs. You've seen this before. Let's do the labels too. These aren't permanent, but you can see these are the POIs that must be on the map for Chaosium. They gave me this list. It gives us up here and all down here for our title and our key. Even here, you know. By the way, I hate covering up my maps with labels and titles and things. But if we make it suitably decorative, it could be nice, right? It would enhance the area. And as long as we're not covering something up like the parks or something like that, I think it would be fine. I'd like to try and leave this rail system sort of showing because it's nuts. But this is such a nice, suitable area to throw our key or something like that. And then, of course, that is our crop area. But we draw beyond it so that they can sort of get it to the size that they want. And if they do print on a poster, you know, they have some crop that for cutting and things like that. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. That might have been a little bit longer than I wanted. Oh, 34 minutes. Holy balls. Anyway, hopefully you got some enjoyment out of that. Some like kind of glimpse behind the scenes for what I'm doing and why I'm doing it that way. If you enjoyed this, or even like, you know, partway through you were like, yeah, okay, that's long enough, but I'm enjoying the general gist of it, let me know. Let me know, because I would love to give you way more glimpses behind the scenes, what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being a patron. It's truly appreciated. Much love to you, and I'll see you on the flip side.